Ladies and gentlemen, it's a cold day. You didn't have to come here. We're very grateful you chose to sit in the cold with us. My name is Alex Keish, and I'm here today as your host because my grandfathers, both of them of blessed memory, are on the memorial wall behind me. We're here today to make our righteous voices more numerous and louder than the voices of hate. We do so by remembering with what some scholars count as the beginning of the Holocaust, Kristallnacht. It marked the day that the German-speaking people in Germany, Austria, Sudetenland rioted for Hitler, giving him support in his actions to come. That night, they killed nearly 100 Jews, brutalizing thousands, marching 26,000 into concentration camps, burning thousands of books, destroying and desecrating our synagogues, 1,000 synagogues, 95 in Vienna alone, and destroying millions of dollars of Jewish businesses. 7.5 years later, ladies and gentlemen, millions more would be dead. Millions. I never met Kurt Marcus of blessed memory, but I admire him, not just because his beloved wife Ruth was a woman of valor, not just because he survived the Holocaust, not just because he was a founding father of our beloved EmekSholom Holocaust Memorial Cemetery, and not just because he was a president of EmekSholom, not just because he left a legacy in his children and grandchildren, but because he framed these words. Listen to them very carefully, they're very impactful. The names on these stones are not those of heroes who died fighting for their country, weapons in hand, trying to defend themselves. These heroes are our own loved ones, had nothing to fight with but a prayer on their lips. On the monuments behind me, you'll see the names of 461 of our beloved murdered during the Shoah. You can inspect the words that are inscribed there. May the sacrifices of our people, O Lord, not have been in vain. As a result of this sacrifice, this horrid slaughter of our people, we Jews vowed never again. And 2.5 million were slaughtered in Cambodia. And we Jews vowed never again. And 300,000 Muslims were slaughtered in Bosnia. And we vowed never again. And 800,000 were slaughtered. Tutsis were slaughtered in Rwanda. Never again. And 2.5 million were slaughtered in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We vowed never again. And tens of thousands of Syrians are being slaughtered today. And we vowed never again. And thousands of Rohingya Muslims are being slaughtered in Myanmar today. Did not the Almighty weep when he slew the Egyptian charioteers and allowed them to drown in the Red Sea? He did so because are we all not his children? And we Jews swore never again. And they exchanged Nazi salutes. They lit bonfires. They marched with torches and Nazi armbands shouting, Blut in Boden, Blut in Boden, blood and soil. A Nazi rallying cries, the Jews will not replace us. Ladies and gentlemen, that's 60 miles from where you are seated right here, not across a vast ocean, in your own backyard. Zachor, remember the theme of our service today. Ladies and gentlemen, Zachor, Zachor, remember. I'd like to introduce a man of distinction in our community, Marvin Rossman. He started his adult life in the Army making training films and TV shows for civilian use. After the military, he began a 54-year law career, passing the Virginia bar after only 2 years at the University of Richmond and earning his law degree from Stetson University in Florida. It was our good fortune that he brought his wife Hannah and his 3 daughters and his practice here to Richmond. He served small and medium-sized businesses and provided a good living for his family, but that wasn't enough for Marvin. He felt he needed to give back to the community, and he worked on many projects pro bono. Recipients of his largesse were Knesset Beth Israel, Chabad, the Virginia Holocaust Museum, which became a 16-year labor of love. He worked pro bono for the Anti-Defamation League in Florida and represented civil rights sit-in demonstrators at trial, following these cases for 3 years from 1960 until 1963. He served as the volunteer chairman of the Board of Corrections, helping many to stay out of jail by serving the community in various other capacities. A measure of a man's greatness does not lie in what he thinks of himself, but in what others think of him. Though not a giant in stature, Attorney Marvin Rossman is a giant in his professional and personal community. His children and grandchildren grew into his expectations for them, and many of his clients have become lifelong friends, not allowing him to retire until well past his 80th year. 3 years ago, Marvin attended a thought-provoking Kristallnacht service right here where you all are sitting, which prompted him to write an open letter to his grandchildren. Be warned, have your hankies ready. As he reads excerpts from this letter, help me to welcome a servant of the community, a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a friend to all who need him, a true mensch, who I call friend, Attorney Marv Rossman. You okay, boy chick?
Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you, Alex. I didn't know I did all that.
Yeah.
Why we are here today. Not my grandparents, but my grandchildren. Sometime after the ceremony here a few years ago, I wrote a letter to my grandchildren, and I shared it with them, and they asked me to share it with you. Because grandchildren are why I'm here. Dear grandchildren, my heart is filled with joy watching you grow, enjoying lives of plenty and privilege. You live in sturdy homes, secure from the elements, warmed in winter, cooled in summer. You have your own bedrooms for sleep and study, bathrooms with showers that run hot or cold at the touch of a lever. Your homes have machines to wash and dry clothes and wash and dry dishes. You have pantries and freezers and refrigerators stocked with food. You have closets full of clothes for function and fashion. You have excellent schools with excellent teachers and wonderful facilities. Not just chemistry labs and biology labs, but computer science and robotics and 3D printers and all the newest technologies. You have computers and flat-screen televisions, iPhones, iPads, iPods for knowledge, communication, and entertainment. You lack for nothing. You enjoy all this not because you're entitled, but because of what your great-grandparents, my parents, did for you, the hardships they endured, their sacrifices, work, and effort. But while you enjoy all this, are you safe? Are you secure? Looking down from your lofty organic granola and yogurt world, what does the Holocaust mean to you? Maybe the Holocaust is simply not relevant to you. After all, your great-grandparents left Europe over 10 years before someone named Hitler somehow came to power in Germany. So maybe it didn't affect you. Is it simply a bump in the road of Jewish history? A tragic aberration caused by a power-crazed madman that could never happen today? A remote incident that happened in another country, another continent, even another century. But have you ever considered that if your great-grandparents had not left Europe, they would almost certainly have been killed? You and practically your entire Jewish European generation would have never been born. Do you see the Holocaust as a direct in-your-face frontal assault, a threat that can rise again at any time, a recognition that anti-Semitism is still alive, and a clarion call to action wherever and whenever lives and property are threatened because of religion or ethnicity? You remember the blood libels in France and Germany, the Inquisition in Spain, pogroms in Russia and Poland? Complacent Jews in Germany in the 1930s who thought the Nuremberg laws and Kristallnacht would just pass. Suicide bombings and rocket attacks in Israel and continuous threats to wipe Israel off the map. Attacks on Jews in Europe, desecration of synagogues in the United States, and in our own streets, Nazi flags and shouts of earth and blood. No Jew will take my job. Be vigilant. Never again. I attended a Kristallnacht memorial service at a local cemetery. Some friends spoke of their relatives slaughtered in the Holocaust, their names, what they looked like, what they did in life. I had no names. I had no faces. I had no stories. My thoughts wandered back. In 1922, Herschel, a 17-year-old young man who 10 years later would become my father, emigrated from a tiny farm outside a remote village in rural Romania. In the same year, Esther, a 16-year-old young woman who 10 years later would become my mother, emigrated from another tiny farm outside a tiny village in southwest Poland. Separately, each was escaping prejudice and poverty to find a new world of opportunity, to build a better life and future. America. Ultimately, they met in the maelstrom of New York City's Lower East Side, fell in love, courted, committed, and married, determined to build a new life for their new and future family. They had only the most rudimentary education. Their children would be educated. College was mandatory, not an option. In our rented duplex apartment, mail we received was mostly put on a little hallway table, bills for the household and my father's small business. Occasionally, there was a letter or sometimes a postcard from relatives in Europe, instantly identified by a different style of handwriting and foreign postage stamps. Occasionally, there were photographs. I still remember a few from the years before the Second World War when I was 7 or 8 years old. A family group photo on the back of a postcard, which I thought was very novel and efficient. A grim-faced father, a dour mother, a brood of half a dozen or so children of mixed sizes, all unsmiling, wearing funny clothes. A young girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, with long hair showing off a white dress. 2 young men in military uniforms trying to look sophisticated, each jauntily holding a cigarette. A young couple in their late teens looking at each other, she holding a scraggly bunch of flowers, maybe an engagement picture. A young boy proudly sitting on a horse, a man, presumably his father, standing holding the reins. Everybody wore old funny clothes. No one smiled. The photos would stay on the table for a while, then disappear, relegated to a bureau drawer to wait until my mother would spare 10 cents for an envelope of glue-on photo corners to be mounted in an album. The mail from Europe stopped with World War II and never resumed. Perhaps a year or two after the end of World War II, we received a different kind of letter. A business-size envelope addressed to my father by typewriter with a printed return address. My mother phoned my father, who came home early that night, right after dinner. My parents sat at the kitchen table. My father carefully slid open the envelope, read the letter, handed it to my mother. They spoke in Yiddish, which they did only when they didn't want us children to understand what was going on or what they were saying. My father refolded the letter, carefully replaced it in the envelope. Over the next year and a half or so, more letters came, some to my father, some to my mother. My parents went through the same routine. My father kept the letters together, a bundle well over an inch thick, bound with a rubber band. We children ultimately learned each letter was a confirmation that a relative or an entire family had been killed or never found. Once I read an absolutely charming folk tale in literature of the Kabbalah. In the infinite instant of creation, Hashem made all the souls for all the people that ever would be born until the end of days. These souls were complete, containing a male and a female component, stored in a special vault in heaven. Some were released from time to time to flutter down to earth, separating into their male and female components to enter into their earthly counterparts at the beginning of life. Sometimes, just sometimes, when the young people were especially worthy, the two halves of the same soul were reunited in marriage, and that, the tale said, was a marriage made in heaven. As my friends at the Kristallnacht memorial service spoke of their relatives who had been murdered in the Holocaust, I envisioned the smoke belching from the chimneys of the crematoria and the wisp of smoke when my father ultimately burned his pathetic pile of letters. I imagined the souls of the slaughtered rising to heaven with the smoke. As we said Kaddish at the Kristallnacht ceremony, I wondered if the souls of the slaughtered had said Kaddish for each other, knowing there was no one left alive to say Kaddish for them. Did anyone say Kaddish for the souls forever remaining in the heavenly vault, souls that would never descend to earth because their earthly counterparts would never be born? I will never know my cousins who were murdered in the Holocaust. You, my dear grandchildren, will never know your European cousins who will never be born because my cousins were murdered. Our sages have said that whoever slays a man is as though he killed an entire world. Be vigilant, my princelings. Be vigilant. Remember the Holocaust. Be forever vigilant. With love from Grandpa. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was very touching. We have 461 names of deceased relatives on the stones behind me, but each one is merely a placeholder for thousands and thousands more who will never be forgotten. Today our family speaker is going to be Rabbi David Asher. He is our dynamic leader of Knesset Beth Israel Synagogue, an Orthodox shul founded in Richmond just before the Civil War. His studies, both secular and religious, carried him to the Jewish Educational Center High School in Elizabeth, New Jersey, then off to Israel Torah studies at Yeshiva, I apologize my pronunciation, She'arei Meveseret, Zion, and a Bachelor of Science degree at Yeshiva University, Israel. Then back to Pace University in New York for a master's degree, not yet finished. He received Simcha, was ordained a rabbi, from Yeshiva University in New York City. In addition to his rabbinical duties at KBI, Rabbi Asher serves on the executive committee of the Richmond Jewish Federation and works as the Jewish religious provider for Bon Secours here in Richmond. He's often recognized for his community works and recently was appointed by Governor McAuliffe to the new Commission of the Commonwealth for Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion. He continued his formal studies in Israel, in Chicago, and postgraduate work, and though I doubt he has a degree in astronomy, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, Rabbi Asher focuses his personal life on the four brightest stars in his universe: his wife, Elisa, and their three children, Ilana, Yaakov, and Ora. Rabbi Asher.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. A few years ago, I was sitting in these seats listening to my friend and colleague, Rabbi Roy Shafin, and I thought to myself that one day, sure enough, with my friend Alex and his invitation, I was able to follow suit and, like Rabbi Shafin, share a little bit about who I am, how I got to Richmond, and the story of my family in terms of the Holocaust. The facts that I'm about to share with you, they're not stories. They're not Holocaust stories. These are lives. These are worlds. And it behooves us to understand that it's more than just a timeline. My grandmother, Ruth Eulau, was born and raised in Aschaffenburg, Germany, outside of Frankfurt. She lived in a beautiful home overlooking the Main River, and she went to an all-girls Catholic school in the 1930s, where they allowed her to take, for her religious requirements, Judaic studies instead of Catholic studies. And she was part of a family that was particularly affluent. Her maiden name was Rothschild. My great-grandfather was the president of his synagogue. He was a textile magnate. Each member of the household had 2 servants. They were one of the first families in their town to have an automobile. Everything was going very well until the Nazis rose to power and things began to change. My grandmother was the middle of 3 girls. The oldest got married, and the husband went to America to secure passage for his wife, my great aunt, and for their baby. He went ahead to America and was able to get the tickets that he needed for the boat, for his wife, and for his son, and for one other caretaker. At the time that he left, nobody really knew how bad it was going to be. The time that he bought the passage, the tickets, he didn't realize what was at stake. And so, my grandmother, as a young teenager, said goodbye to her parents, knowing at that time that this might be the last time she saw her mother, or her father, or her little sister again. Sure enough, as was the case, every last member of her family was murdered by the Nazis thereafter and sent to Auschwitz. My grandmother had the ticket for passage that she thought, just by fate alone, she was the middle child, the older child, and her little sister was killed in part because she took the ticket to freedom. And she lived with that for the rest of her life, the guilt of knowing that she was responsible in some way, in her own mind, for the death of her little sister. My grandfather, Arthur Eulau, 79 years ago to the day of Kristallnacht, several hours before the pogrom began, was able to sneak away from a little village called Rohrbach, also not too far from Frankfurt, a farming village. He was one of 3 boys. They all ran for their lives. My grandfather ended up in America. His brother ended up in Britain and actually flew missions for the Royal Air Force, bombing Nazi targets towards the end of World War II. Years later, my grandfather and grandmother began to start anew, to build a world together. They settled in Massachusetts, and there, in the summers as I was a child, I would go and visit them. I didn't think of them as survivors, people who lost everything in the Holocaust as they did, although it was known to me. I thought of them as my grandparents. But as a child, as a boy, in the middle of the night, I'd stay in their house, and I would hear, from time to time, the screaming and the crying, the nightmares that they would have. Calling out for their parents that they lost. My grandmother calling out for her sister. Thinking of the crematoriums that took their loved ones, their cousins. No, I never met a Nazi. No, I never had to wear a yellow star. No, there were no religious freedoms taken away from me the way in which impacted my ancestors in Germany. But the reach of these subhuman epitomes of evil did impact me as well. You fast forward all these years later, and you say to yourself, as a grandchild, that never again is not enough. Remember, Zachor is not enough. We know, and we're all familiar with the famous axiom, that all it takes for evil to prosper is for good people to do nothing. And so, in some small way, with my wife by my side, one day she'll share her story of her grandparents in the Holocaust, perhaps. We've dedicated ourselves to Jewish continuity. In some small way, the retribution, the revenge, is not one which is passive, not one which just stays in the memory, but one in which we take it very seriously, a sort of charge or a mission to make sure that that which the Jewish people perished for all these years ago was not, as it is said here at this cemetery, in vain, but is in fact part of a broader, greater effort to understand that the Jewish spirit is not bound by time and space. The indomitable Jewish spirit is something which allows for the words of the Torah to leap off the page as the letters combine with the voices of the souls now gone, as they call out to us and emblazon upon our souls the charge and the responsibility and the motivation to make sure the Jewish people continue always with a unique kind of vigor and with a unique kind of energy to make sure that this community and all communities and descendants of those impacted by the Holocaust will be stronger than ever before. Thank you.
Marvelous, heartwarming, and well told. Thank you, Rabbi. Ladies and gentlemen, EmekSholom board member and treasurer Evelyn Windmiller is the strong, silent type. She seldom speaks, but when she does, we listen because we know that she has something important to share. I know she is strong because few could weather her recent storms as well as she has, losing both a significant other and then her daughter in a very short space of time. I'm not sure if Esther, her daughter, was beautiful and brilliant or brilliant and beautiful, but I do know she was loved and admired by all. Fellow board member, attorney Esther Windmiller, initiated this Never Again Award that we have now renamed the Esther J. Windmiller Never Again Award in her honor. I once told my cousin Cindy Crumbine that I wanted to do something great before I died. She said, "You already have." I have. She said, "Yes, your 3 children, Jason, Sabrina, and Heather." So I tell you, Evelyn, you have done something great as well. Help me, one and all, to welcome Ms. Evelyn Windmiller, who will present the winner of the Esther J. Windmiller Award, Never Again. I didn't see.
Thank you, Alice.
Let me see.
I don't know about the silent part.
Okay.
Okay. As Alex says, I am proud to present this year's winner of the Esther J. Windmiller Never Again Award. My daughter created the concept of the Never Again Award to bring light that history is repeating itself, and that although we need to remember the past, we also need to be active today to prevent and combat further genocide in today's world. This year's winner, Brianna Schwam, a senior at Godwin High School and a granddaughter of 2 Holocaust survivors. Her topic is education and taking action against anti-Semitism. And without further ado, here is Brianna.
As a granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor and an Israeli pioneer, combating anti-Semitism has become an important part of my life as an active Jew in my community. Both Jews and non-Jews are the backbone to ensuring that there is a Jewish future. I feel responsible for making my impact. Anne Frank once said, "Despite everything, I feel that people are really good at heart," denoting how unity overpowers hate. From generation to generation, Lador Vador, Jews will educate, Jews will take action, and Jews will inspire. In order to combat anti-Semitism, the first step is to stay educated. How can you defend Judaism in the Holocaust without facts? The best way to stay educated is to listen to personal stories, make your own personal views, and to understand multiple perspectives. It is vital for Jews and non-Jews to unite against hatred and prejudice through education. For me, I found the best way to find my connection is through my grandparents and their stories, living during the Holocaust and risking their lives for the future of Israel. Furthermore, being a part of the Richmond Jewish community has helped me develop an understanding of Judaism and the importance of heritage. Additionally, being a Stand With Us intern has helped me learn about the different Jewish communities and different ways to approach challenging anti-Semitic situations. Actions overpower words. Instead of saying never again, make a promise to take action and empower others. The more people involved, the greater the impact. To take action, use your voice on social media, execute programming, and host Holocaust speakers at community events. By taking action, you develop into an active supporter rather than a passive supporter. You allow yourself to become involved and further connect with others. Last December, I coordinated a Shabbat service at the Richmond Holocaust Museum for the community, encouraging teens and families to read Holocaust stories and look at the display. Creating clubs about combating anti-Semitism helps educate teens. Last year, I founded a Jewish club focusing on the importance of education. Taking action means involving others and creating a community-wide event to educate, reflect, and to commemorate. Make a change. Be the change. I will be attending March for the Living this April, along with fellow teen leaders across the entire globe. As I travel from Poland to Israel, I will take this experience back home to my school and community. I am pursuing my passion in education in Israel by firsthand experiencing my homeland. I am creating my movement by implementing how to combat anti-Semitism programming in my school, temples, and Jewish-affiliated clubs. If you encounter an anti-Semitic situation, it is important to have support from others. There are numerous interdenominational organizations to contact and create a campaign to fight against hatred. For example, Interfaith Alliance protects faith and freedom to all and will support you in starting a local alliance in addition to joining the international movement. In addition, you can write to local and national Holocaust museums. Thus, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and the Kinder Transport Association are helpful organizations to share your perspective at national conferences and to gain support. Lastly, it is important to donate to community outreach groups, such as the Jewish Federation, to help create educational sessions for teens worldwide to learn how to speak up. For hundreds of years, Jews have been persecuted. Anne Frank had perseverance and a strong, bold voice. She inspires children and families to stand up for what they believe in. Her message helps people find the burning light in the darkness. Anne Frank shared her story. I am sharing my story, and now it is time to create our movement. Thank you.
Well spoken, Brianna, and congratulations on your award. I understand it's a cash reward. I may see you later for a loan. I saw Donnie Fogel at the Weinstein JCC lap pool a few weeks ago with a little boy he introduced as Ami. It was obvious that the bond between the two was woven with love and trust. As they swam and they splashed together, I admired the strong arms and kind heart of a father, hovering in loving protection. Those same strong arms and kind heart belong to the point person for security in our Jewish community. Daniel Eitan Fogel, an IDF-trained, Israeli-trained combat soldier, whose mission is your protection and mine. Donnie was born in Israel to dual U.S.-Israeli parents and raised in America, holding both American and Israeli citizenship. You might say that America is his father and Israel is his mother. Strong of body and mind, Donnie earned his BA of Jewish Studies from the University of Maryland, College Park, and his Master's in Arts in Government, Public Policy, and Administration in Israel. He returned to the States nearly 3 years ago to serve as the JSCFR, the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond, as Director of Jewish Community Relations and overseas programming. An important source of his strength comes from the woman of valor at his side, his wife, Tamir. The little boy, Ami, that I spoke of earlier, has a proud heritage. You see, his full name is Amitzur, Hebrew for, my nation is strong. And Yehoshua, the name of his great-grandfather, who fought the Nazis. Zakor Ami, Zakor. I have one accomplished son who I'm proud of, Jason Alexander Kaish. If I could choose a second son, it would be Daniel Eitan Fogel. Please help me welcome Donnie Fogel.
I'm enormously honored to be here. Thank you. What a powerful essay from Brianna. As the Director of Jewish Community Relations and Israel and Overseas Programming for the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond, I'm really honored and deeply pleased that Brianna is part of the programming that we do in our Teen Richmond Israel program. It's one of the ways that we teach about Jewish identity. Teach young adults in particular to be proud of who we are. As Alex mentioned, my name is Daniel Eitan. I'm the son of Sarah Yehudit and Eliezer Ze'ev Moshe. My maternal grandfather, Yehoshua, for whom my son is named, is the son of Shimon Yitzchak Halevi. He lost dozens of members of his family in the Shoah. They were living outside of Immelhaifoven in Hungary. My paternal grandfather, Binyamin, was the son of Eliezer Ze'ev, for whom my father is named. Of 40 cousins, 3 survived, living outside of Brzeźin, just south of Lodz. My wife, Tamir, has maternal grandparents. Sarah, the son of Chanoch and Dvorah, and Chaim Aryeh, the son of Dvorah and Avraham. Both grandparents lost half of their siblings to the Nazis in Auschwitz. The irony is the two of them met in a small labor camp and later made their way through Atlit and eventually were married and raised the wonderful family that led to my wife. We are the living memory of those murdered. We will be, please God, strong enough to pass that memory on and see it continued in our son. Reflecting on the Holocaust is beyond any one of us. It's beyond any one day. And so when I was initially approached, the topic I asked to discuss was the various ways that the Holocaust is remembered internationally. Because there are at least 3, and there are frankly many more than 3, days set to commemorate, to memorialize, to remember. And I want to touch on them. But as you'll hear at the end of my talk, more recent events compel me to go further. As we've all mentioned, Zachor, remember, is an inherently Jewish concept. God commands us to remember time and time again throughout the Bible. And the enormity of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, is such that it's entirely appropriate that there be multiple days and different ways that we embody this living memory. The United Nations General Assembly designated January 27th as the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And on this day every year, the UN urges member states to honor victims of the Nazi era and develop educational programs to help prevent future genocides. Okay, that was in 2005. That is the most recent of established Remembrance Days. The date most commonly used internationally is the Israeli established Holocaust and Heroism Remembrance Day, or what is termed by most Holocaust Memorial Day, Holocaust Remembrance Day, which falls on the 27th day of the Hebrew or Jewish calendar during the month of Nisan. It's set there due to its proximity to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and falls 8 days before the celebration of Israel's Independence Day. It was established by Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, and Israel's second President, Yitzhak Ben-Zvi, in 1953. The United States follows in that track, as do many others. But long before those dates were established, there was and there remains a Jewish mourning day, the 9th day of the Jewish month of Av, Tisha B'Av. And we have to ask ourselves how many different ways there are to remember. Traditionally, on the 9th day of Av, we refrain from joyous or even quasi-happy or enjoyable activities. But in Israel, Holocaust Remembrance Day is observed very differently. There's a ceremony the evening before. Torches are lit. 6, of course, marking the 6 million Jews that were taken from us. And the next day at 10 a.m., in addition to all the ceremonies that take place in every single school and in every single military base and in every single government office, in every town and city, an air raid siren blasts across the entire country. And for 2 minutes, the entire nation comes to its feet and stands absolutely silent. Cars stop on the highway, pedestrians stop in the streets, buses pull to the side of the road, and passengers stand in their spot. And I mention this because if we go over, even briefly, a list of the tragedies that have befallen the Jewish people on the 9th day of Av, or near it even, we literally go back thousands of years. Our tradition teaches us, the Mishnah describes 5 calamities that befell the Jewish people on that day. The first one is dated to 1312, before the Common Era. The second is from 586, the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem. The second is 70 CE, the destruction of the second temple, and then the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135, and in 136, the razing of Jerusalem. Those were hundreds and, well, literally thousands of years ago. But more recently, other events have transpired, including some on the Holocaust, during the Holocaust. But before we get to the Holocaust, in 1492, we all know that Columbus sailed the ocean blue. What we don't remember is that it was on the 9th day of Av in 1492 that the Jews were expelled from Spain. In 1290, on the 9th day of Av, on the Tisha B'Av, Jews were expelled from England. World War I broke out with the declaration of war, Germany declaring war on Russia on the 9th day of Av. And many would tell you that that was the predecessor, of course, the run-up to the Holocaust. SS Commander Heinrich Himmler, EmekSholom, his name should be erased from memory, approved the final solution on the 9th day of Av. How could it be that this is one way of looking at the world and that we need more days? And the answer is exactly as I began. There is no way that one day can allow us to understand what befell our people. As Rabbi Asher said, these aren't dates. These were lives. These were human beings. These were their stories. On the 9th day of Av, we sing, we talk about the destruction of Jerusalem, and we bemoan, we weep what we lost. And I have to wonder if a generation after that destruction, if 2 generations after that destruction, our ancestors didn't have gatherings just like we're having today. Didn't have gatherings that said, either I was there and I saw it, or my parents were there and they saw it, and we'll never forget, and we'll continue to bemoan and to mourn this loss. I mentioned to Captain Kaish, Alex, that I would like permission to go a little bit further, because recent events have transpired which make this gathering both timely and extraordinarily poignant. We discussed a little bit what happened in Charlottesville. We made mention of the rise of a new wave of anti-Semitism, of bigotry, of hatred. Just last week, the Anti-Defamation League released some new figures. With your permission, I'll share a few of them. As of November 2nd, ADL said that there had been 1,299 anti-Semitic incidents from January 1st through September 30th, which represent a 67% increase during the same period last year. So if someone asks, can we quantify an increase? The answer is unequivocally yes. They go on and say that there was an increase further still following the Unite the Right rally that took place in Charlottesville. The ADL audit includes physical assaults, vandalism, and attacks on Jewish institutions, including bomb threats. In its categorization, of anti-Semitic incidents, and the 2017 total to date already exceeds the 1,266 incidents reported in all of 2016. The last number I want to share with you is this one. From January 1st to September 30th, incidents in schools with kindergarten through 12th grade rose to 269, more than double the 130 that were reported during the same period in 2016. On college campuses, incidents increased 59% over the same period in 2016. And so for us to say, never again, is indeed not enough. Denial is a very powerful thing. And denial is a very dangerous thing. To believe, to truly believe never again, requires acknowledging that again is possible. And saying it could never happen here, saying it could never happen anywhere, is not only to ignore all the statistics I just read, but to ignore the entire list of dates, which were lives, which I mentioned. Brianna is absolutely right. Actions do speak louder than words. And I'm very deeply proud to be a part of the Jewish Community Federation of Richmond. When we see when we see hatred in children, we will fight that hatred with education. When we see hatred in adults, we will combat that hatred with education and with our loud advocacy and with the full force of the law. I'm enormously honored to be a part of an organization that does that, to share this day with you. And I'd leave you asking God to bless the souls who were robbed of their full lives, to strengthen the hands of those committed to fighting hatred, to bless the state of Israel and the United States of America. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's some scholars who believe the numbers that were murdered will be in excess of 12 million when the final word is put on a piece of paper in a book. Right now we honor 6 million. I once bemoaned to a Holocaust scholar that why there are not more Yiddish-speaking shows. The Yiddish theater was so active, and Yiddish newspapers and magazines. And he put a very quick halt to my inquiry. He said, because half the Yiddish speakers in the world were killed. That's how complete the slaughter was. We're going to be lighting the candles now. This is a memory of 6 million. There may be many more still not accounted for. Candle lighters, please. What you hear in the background is meditation done by the Russian violinist Leonid Primek. And the names of those who appear on the wall are in the forefront of the music.
Fried, László Fried, Joseph Fried, Herman Kupferstein, Ella P. Weiss, Andor Weiss, Tibor Weiss, Jenő Pörstin, Rosa P. Farkas, Zoltán Farkas,
The names are being read by Holocaust survivors who live here in Richmond.
Viktor Farkas, Géza Pörstin,
My mother and father are both partisans.
István Pörstin,
Meaningful questions are important
Bistrik,
to keep
Joseph Tenenbaum, Ephraim
the memory alive. I once was asked by a student if my father ever wore
Schering,
the yellow star.
Heidi Schering,
It startled me
Emma Schwartz,
because
Tibor
My father never
Schwartz,
wore the star.
Jonas
My father
Schwartz,
gave the Italian salute, I
Anna
believe.
Schwartz,
When asked to wear the
Joseph
star,
Schwartz,
he would never have.
Otto
He was a tough
Schwartz,
partisan.
Helena Schwartz,
My mother was a tough
Lily
partisan.
Moscovich,
She carried my twin and me in utero, hiding from
Brumagina,
and fighting the
Adolf
Germans.
Hanau,
Sally Bukovtsa, Pauline G. Bukovtsa, Max Hirsch, Paula J. Hirsch, Chava Falk, Marcus Falk, Sarah Horowitz, Zalman Horowitz, Walter Blumenthal, Elsa S. Kamnitzer, Leopold Hamburger, Margareta Hamburger, Rivka H. Itzkovitz, Fischel Itzkovitz,
The Candlelighters
Wendell
are second and
Viatrak,
third generation survivors.
Asta A. Viatrak.
Leibisch Lebensbaum.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Hassan who we had asked to do the chore for us today is here today physically, but not capable because of a lung infection. He does a terrific job, and at the last minute we asked a favor of a wonderful local rabbi. Rabbi Ahuva Zaks, rhymes with wax, she told me, came to us from California to serve as the rabbi and education director of Congregation Orami, a dynamic sacred community embracing the principles of Reform Jewish movement. If your knowledge of Jewish prayer is as limited as mine, and I apologize for that, you might want to check out Rabbi Zaks' Prayer Eoki. It's a program on YouTube. If you can't remember that, just Google YouTube Rabbi. I did, and discovered she has some of her favorite prayers having over 100,000 hits. I'm going to add a few more to that, I think. A formative part of her education was the college semester she spent in the Czech Republic and Poland. She was studying Jewish communities of Central and Eastern Europe, and in doing so, she visited Terezin and Auschwitz, and certainly left lasting impressions on her future life. Hopefully, our participation in today's service will give her some closure to that dramatic and powerful experience of visiting those hard camps. I will ask you all to rise as she comes forward. She's going to be doing two prayers. She's going to be doing Kaddish. I want you to understand that Kaddish is chanted, it's not sung. We mourners say Kaddish to show that despite our loss, we still praise God. The first prayer she's going to do is a song. It's a heartful song. I always have a hard time keeping a dry eye when it's sung. It's our prayer sung for the soul of the departed. Please find comfort in the words, the melody, and the spirit in which it is going to be sung. Rabbi Wax.
El Mali Rachamim Shochen Bameromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Al Kanfei Hashchina B'malot Kiroshim Utahorim Kizahar Harakia Mazhirim Et Nishmot Achenu B'nei Yisrael Shemasru Nafsham Al Kiddush Hashem Bavo Shekol HaKahal HaKadosh Hazeh Notnim Tzedakah Be'ad Hazkarat Nishmatam Began Eden Zeh Menuchatam Lachein Bal Harachamim Yastirem Beseter Kenafav Leolamim Ve'yitrov Yitzrach Hayim Et Nishmatam Adonai Hu Nachalatam Vayanuchu B'Shalom Al Mishkavam V'nomar Amen. Please join me in reading the English translation together. God sublime, abounding in compassion, grant perfect rest to the souls of all the martyred children of Israel who gave their lives for the sanctification of thy name. May they be under the wings of thy divine presence in the celestial realm of paradise, in the sphere of the holy and pure who shine resplendent as the luminous firmament. In their hallowed memory, those in this congregation offer charity. Bind up their souls in the bond of life with thee as their eternal heritage. God of mercy, may they rest evermore in the shelter of thy wings at peace, and let us say, Amen. We continue reading responsively. I believe this is Elie Wiesel's Kaddish. Yitgadal, V'yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach chirutei, V'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon uvyomechon, Uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uvizman kariv, V'yimru Amen. Yehi Shmei Mevorach le'olam olomei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach, V'yitba'ar v'yitromam, V'yitnaseh v'yithadar, V'yit'aleh v'yithalal, Shemei dekudesha, Brichu, le'ela, Min kol birchata v'shirata, Tush bechata v'nechamata, Da'amiran be'alma, V'imru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you noticed, between the lines of the Hebrew, there was a name of a camp, a death camp, or a concentration camp. I've heard, you may be seated, please. I've heard various interpretations. The reason why Jews leave a stone on a monument of a beloved deceased is because there are no flowers in the desert. That's a good one. It may be true. I've heard that it is symbolic of the stones we would leave on the graves so the animals wouldn't get our beloved. That's a good one as well. What's important really, though, is that we all today leave a stone on the monuments behind me, because today it's an indicator that there are people here who love and care about them. And if you would, our ushers, the stones are here. Everyone here so inclined, please pick up a stone and place it on the monument behind me. That concludes our services. Thank you all for coming. It was a cold day, but hate is colder.
Hillel Levitansky. Doba Levitansky. Lisa Levitansky.
Speaker next year.
Would I like to? I don't really enjoy public speaking.
Lean on her a little bit.
We'll work on it. We'll work on it. Hey, Tom. Well, thank you.
You know what?
Isaac, Canaval, and 11 family members. Sorry for my cough.
Oh, how are you doing? Good. Good. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
It almost wouldn't be the same if you were here.
Molly S.
For some reason,
I do too.
Are you still dog sitting?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Let go.